The Scarecrow's Curse. Part 1. The Harvest of Dread. Martha and James, their faces etched with decades of sun and toil, inhabited a secluded farmhouse in the heart of rural Alabama. Their land stretched like a patchwork quilt. Cornfields whispering secrets, cotton bolls bursting forth, and a gnarled apple orchard where memories clung like dewdrops. One sweltering afternoon, they stumbled upon an anomaly as they rattled home from town in their rusty pickup truck. There, by the roadside, stood an old scarecrow. A pitiful figure with straw for bones and tattered rags clinging to its frame. But what set it apart were its grotesque appendages. Knives for fingers, switchblades for feet. Its hollow eyes seemed to bore into their souls. Martha, her curiosity piqued, declared, "James, that scarecrow would be perfect for our farm. It'll keep the crows away." And sir, they loaded the abominable figure into their truck, its blades clinking like a macabre wind chime. Martha's fingers brushed against the cold steel as she secured it. When they got home, James hammered a sturdy pole into the garden soil, and together, they raised the scarecrow, its hollow eyes surveying their land. Their loyal dog, Rufus, barked and growled, refusing to approach the sinister effigy. But Martha dismissed it as mere canine unease. Part 2. The Night of Feathers and Blood. That night, as the moon climbed high, the couple lay in their creaky bed. Outside, the crows gathered. An ominous congregation. Their cawing echoed through the darkness, a discordant symphony. Martha whispered, "James, do you hear them? The crows are terrified." James grunted, half asleep. "Just birds, Martha. They'll settle." But when dawn painted the sky, they stepped into a nightmare. Feathers littered the garden, crimson stains marring the earth. The scarecrow stood, its blades dripping with avian blood. The crows lay lifeless, their eyes wide open, as if accusing the monstrosity. Terrified, they called Sheriff Daniels. He arrived, a portly man with a skeptical frown. "Kids prank, I reckon," he said. "Bored teenagers," he concluded. But the horror escalated. Rufus vanished, leaving only a trail of paw prints and a whimpering void. Bloody marks appeared on the porch, claw-like gouges etched into the wood. Martha's trembling hands traced the grooves. The work of no human child. Part 3. The Scarecrow's Malevolence. James, weary and frantic, examined the house's exterior. Huge claw marks scarred the walls, and the door showed signs of the Scarecrow's attempts to invade their refuge. "Martha," he whispered, "this thing is unnatural." Martha nodded, her eyes wide. James and Martha knew they had to act quickly. The Scarecrow was cursed, and it had brought evil to their land. "Get the gas can from the truck and meet me at the barn. I'll grab the Scarecrow," James said. He dashed into the house and grabbed his lighter. Martha followed him, holding the can with shaking hands. James came out with a lantern and headed to the field to retrieve the Scarecrow and end this nightmare. When James got to the center of the field, he held his lantern high only to reveal an old splintery pole sticking out of the ground. James shivered and yelled for Martha. "I'm right here," Martha shouted from the barn. James looked over and saw a glimmer in the darkness moving through the field toward the barn. James ran as fast as he could and met Martha at the barn door. Martha asked where it was. James looked at Martha with a pale and lifeless expression. All James could utter was a faint whisper. "It's coming," he said, "it's coming." They ran inside the barn and shut the door as quietly as possible. Martha, peeking out from between the boards, saw the Scarecrow emerge from behind the farmhouse, moving swiftly towards the barn. Martha whispered to James to let him know the Scarecrow would soon be at the door. Silence fell over them as time froze, and the only sounds that could be heard were that of muffled breathing and the sounds of crickets in the night. Then a metallic sound could be heard from the side of the barn, faint at first. Soon the sound turned into the sound of metal scraping across wood. James whispered to Martha to go to the top of the barn, and that as soon as she saw the Scarecrow to pour the kerosene on it. No sooner did Martha nod her head and climb up the ladder did a loud metallic slashing sound come from the barn door. James held his breath and knew he had to act to save his wife and his farm from this evil. James gripped the handle of his lantern as the barn door slowly slid open. There it was, a dark silhouette of rags, straw, and knives, all arranged into the rough shape of a person. It slowly entered the barn, locking its dark grin onto James. As the Scarecrow took its steps further and further into the barn, Martha waited for the perfect chance. As the Scarecrow walked further, it raised its sharp hands towards James. Right then Martha poured kerosene over it. James, not wasting any time, threw his lantern towards the creature. The Scarecrow burst into flames, but it did not give up. It thrashed and wreathed, a blazing shadow of horror. James stumbled, choking on smoke, while Martha screamed for him to run. Martha hurried down the ladder and out of the barn. She looked around trying to spot James, but he was nowhere. Martha ran inside the barn only to find James burned but alive, trying to escape the smoke and blaze of the fire. The Scarecrow thrashed and shrieked, almost as if it refused to die. In the end, they prevailed. The barn burned, and the Scarecrow with it. James suffered burns, but they survived. As the ashes settled, they vowed never to speak of it again. Yet, on moonless nights, they'd catch a glimpse of a shadow. A twisted figure with knives for fingers lurking at the edge of their property. The Scarecrow's curse lingered, a reminder that some evils couldn't be buried in flames. And Martha and James tended their farm, their eyes scanning the horizon, knowing that darkness could take root even in the sunniest fields. The Scarecrow's malevolence remains, a spectral whisper in the rustling leaves. Part 4. Forgotten Nightmares. Years passed, and the Scarecrow's memory faded like a forgotten nightmare. The land yielded its bounty. Golden corn, snow-white cotton, and apples blushing crimson. Yet, shadows clung to the edges of their existence. Martha, now silver-haired and stooped, sat on the porch swing, her eyes tracing the horizon. James had passed on, leaving her alone with memories and the weight of secrets. Rufus, too, had vanished, swallowed by the night. One moonless eve, as the wind whispered through the orchard, Martha glimpsed movement. A flicker of darkness near the Scarecrow's old post. Her breath caught. Could it be? She shuffled toward the garden, her heart pounding. The Scarecrow stood there, unchanged, its blades glinting in the faint starlight. Its eyes, those hollow pits, seemed to fixate on her, as if it remembered her touch, her trembling hands stitching its torn fabric. James, Martha whispered, her voice lost in the rustling leaves. What curse did we unleash? The Scarecrow remained silent, its stitched mouth a mockery of a smile. Martha reached out, her fingers grazing the switchblade feet. Memories flooded back. The night they'd set it ablaze, the barn consumed by flames, James staggering out, skin seared. But the Scarecrow had risen from those ashes, its malevolence undiminished. It haunted her dreams, whispered secrets in the wind. And now, it awaited her. Part 5. The Bargain with Shadows. Martha felt a surge of determination. She had to face her terror once and for all. The Scarecrow had claimed James, Rufus, and fragments of her soul. She would end its reign. She ran inside her barn, where she had stored the kerosene, matches, and her trusty shotgun. She grabbed them quickly and headed back outside. There, she saw the Scarecrow staring at her, its eyes sparkling. "You want me?" she whispered. "Fine. Let's do this." As she neared, the Scarecrow moved, blades flashing. But Martha had a scheme. She'd draw it away from the house, into the desolate field where the crops had decayed. There, she'd set the ground ablaze. Martha had always dreaded the comeback of the Scarecrow, so she had concealed a huge amount of gas cans beneath the soil as a snare just in case. "Come," she challenged, her voice cracking. "Your curse dies tonight." The Scarecrow trailed, its steps silent. Martha's heart thumped. She'd heard stories that evil can take many shapes, and that evil can never perish. It was a conduit for something ancient, something ravenous, something alien. Martha noticed the Scarecrow was advancing, almost gliding fast at her. She hastened her pace. Martha was gasping and every part of her body was frozen from fear. All Martha could hear was her heart hammering in her chest, but in her mind she knew she was ready. Part 6. The Scarecrow's Inferno. In the pitch-black night, Martha arrived at the middle of the field. The Scarecrow towered, its blades ready. She lit a match, flames bursting into life. The Scarecrow attacked, but Martha dodged, her shotgun loaded. "James," she murmured, "forgive me." She shot. The Scarecrow stumbled, its fabric burning and caught fire. But it didn't collapse. Instead, it chuckled. A deep sound that froze her blood. "You think fire can stop me?" It snarled. "I am hunger. I am revenge." Martha backed away, her resolve steadfast. She'd give up everything. The farm, her memories, her very being. To end the curse. As the flames devoured the Scarecrow, it wreathed, its blades swinging. Martha tripped, her skin scorching. But she held on, her eyes locked on the blaze. The Scarecrow bellowed with a thunderous laughter as it rose and walked toward her. Martha gazed silently at the Scarecrow as it moved. She lifted her shotgun and aimed it at the evil creature. "You can't kill me, old woman," the Scarecrow said. Martha smirked and aimed her shotgun at the ground and said, "This is for James." Martha fired a blast at the ground. As soon as she did, there was an explosion of heat and flames. Martha ran swiftly to avoid the flames. "That was for James," she said. Screams and cries of a demonic voice yelling, "You can't destroy me." Martha stood up and looked at the flaming creature. It was a flaming skeleton steaming from its eyes. Martha stood and faced the creature, its blades glowing from the heat. Martha stared into the dark emptiness of the creature's eye sockets and said, "This is for James," as she fired a shot directly at the creature's head, shattering it. Its body fell to the ground and Martha fired another shot which boomed as more and more of the gas cans from the underground began to burn. "That's for Rufus," she said. She fell back with exhaustion as her fear left her body and the sound of sirens in the distance. She knew it was over. She knew the evil had finally died.